Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Avani Abha, and I'm a research intern at the Institute of Chinese Studies, New Delhi. I extend a warm welcome to all to today's ICS Wednesday seminar titled The Gen Z Movement in Nepal China's Challenge or Opportunity. In recent months, Nepal has witnessed a youth led political movement that has ushered in yet another period of transform and transition. The interim Prime Minister Sushila Karki faces the dual challenge of conducting fresh elections within 6 months and navigating the country's foreign policy amid this changing landscape. Landlocked between India and China, Nepal has traditionally shared close cultural, economic, and political ties with India. However, since 2008, left political parties have advocated for deeper engagement with China. With none of the traditional parties, including the left, represented in the current interim setup, this seminar examines how China may seek to engage with Nepal's evolving political landscape. It also explores how the youth will perceive relations with Beijing differently, especially in the context of the shifting India Nepal dynamics over the past 2 decades. The speaker for today's seminar is Dr. Rishi Gupta. He is the Assistant Director at the Asia Society Policy Institute, New Delhi, and visiting fellow at the Asian Institute of Diplomacy and International Affairs, Kathmandu. He earned his PhD in International Studies from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Dr. Gupta is also a regular columnist for the print, Hindustan Times, and Dainik Jagran. His research focuses on Indo Pacific security and South Asian geopolitics, particularly the Himalayan region. The chair for today's seminar is Professor Mahendra P. Lama. He is an adjunct fellow at the Institute of Chinese Studies and a senior professor at the School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. He currently serves as Emeritus Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of Sikkim. He was the founding Vice Chancellor of the Central University of Sikkim, the youngest Vice Chancellor of a national university in India. Professor Lama has also served as a member of the National Security Advisory Board, Government of India. Until recently, he was India's nominee in the Eminent Persons Group constituted by the Prime Ministers of India and Nepal. His recent publication, Strengthening Trade and Transport Connectivity in Eastern South Asia, further underscores his long standing engagement in South Asian cooperation and development. Before I hand over to the chair, I would like all participants to follow a few housekeeping rules. All participants shall be muted during the seminar. Questions may be posted in the chat box along with your name and affiliation. Alternatively, you may use the raise your hand option during the interactive session. You shall then be called upon to unmute yourself. Thank you. Over to you, Professor Lama.
Well, thank you very much, Avani and Sital, and welcome to Dr. Rishi Gupta and all the participants in this very interesting conversations today organized by Institute of Chinese Studies. Uh, well, the theme today is about uh, the Gen Z movement in Nepal and what are the implications, keeping particularly focused on China's uh, attitude, one, secondly, China's role in the very near future. Uh, well, interestingly, when this 2 days of very violent movement happened in Nepal, I happened to be there on 9th and 10th, and I had gone there to primarily speak about building peace, cooperations, and development in South Asia. And it did happen exactly the other way around. Those 2 days, uh, if I have to say, those 2 days, what was my impression? I thought this is for the first time, the four very critical uh, institutions had collapsed in Nepal for those 2 complete days. First, of course, all the governmental machineries had collapsed. There was no semblance of presence of a government. Secondly, all the security related institutions had collapsed. Thirdly, I could also say that the political parties did not exist at all. And fourthly, the civil society had also collapsed. So it was absolutely mm, a very, very diabolical situations for Nepal for 2 full days. And all the destructions happened within 8 to 10 hours. And they were, I must say, as I had told immediately after coming back to the wire, that it seemed to be a very well planned, uh, at least the destruction part of it. Uh, I think it's very interesting to see how Nepal, the Nepali people there have come out of the situations and so fast, so quickly, right, and so steadily. And today, looking back and seeing what is happening today, right, it appears that people have forgotten to a large extent. But I think four challenges, I'm sure Dr. Rishi Gupta would be dealing with it, would be four challenges, very formidable challenges are there before us. First is related to the, the relations between government and the people at large is no longer there. People's faith, people's, uh, aspirations vis-a-vis the government, it has totally collapsed. So this is a first challenge. Who will do what in order to restore this faith? Our number two challenge is, I think, it appeared at that particular point of time that Nepal does not have the right institutions to deal with a kind of aspirations that have been brought forward by uh, induction, very steady induction of democratic processes. You have democracies, right, on the one hand, but on the other hand, one could see that the institutions were of, again, very old orthodox variety, and they could not really cope up. And this is the second challenge today. And the third is related to how they are going to rebuild not only the physical infrastructures, but also all kinds of legal, constitutional uh, damage. And the third significant challenge, of course, is who will really conduct the elections, how swiftly, how timely, right, and how effectively, right? And the fourth, of course, is what would happen to the constitutions, legal issues, federalism, all these. So I think Nepal today has absolutely a new variety of challenges which nobody had foreseen or even thought that they will have to deal with such a situation. So, given these four significant challenges, and of course, the fifth would be the roles of neighboring countries, including India, to a certain extent, China, and of course, uh, the US and other European countries who have been their significant players. So, therefore, I would now invite Dr. Rishi Gupta to make his presentations for about 30 to 35 minutes. Then we will have discussions on this. And I'm sure this is going to be a very, very interesting session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Lama. Let me begin by thanking Professor Alkacharya for inviting me. And secondly, what a surprise to have you as my chair here. Having been your student, having learned a lot, and also the brief that you gave on the situation certainly speaks volumes on your experience and your engagement with a country like Nepal. And certainly, we have learned a lot from your research and writing. And this is again opportunity for me to reflect my views on the situation there. So my presentation has two parts. The first part is with regards to what happened basically in Nepal, the Gen Z movement, the backdrop and the making of it, the factors, the underlying factors. And the second part would include how China has looked at it, at three levels. One would be the official level, second at the social media chatter that exists, and the third one would be the media, how Chinese media perceived. Certainly, not having the Mandarin language knowledge, there have been limitations in accessing some of the data. Certainly, digital tools do help, but also a lot of websites that are not accessible from India were a certain challenge, posed a certain challenge. But if I can start with, let me share my PPT. That would be easier to keep me afloat in the presentation. Give me a second. Uh, Let me know if it is visible to all.
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Okay. So thank you again. As we know, Gen Z movement in Nepal, China's challenge, and or is it an opportunity? Let me delve into a bit of the backdrop. As Professor Lama already mentioned, that he was there in Nepal and also witnessed to what was happening, and also very rightly said, the collapse of institutions certainly has been the biggest highlight of what has happened in Nepal in the past month. But let me begin with a bit of backdrop. It all started trending on social media was the Nepo baby, Nepo kids that were trending on social media platforms. And that was primarily targeted towards a certain affluent families and their kids and their close nexus with the good businesses houses, their role in the media, their role in the politics. And there were also a lot of targeted AI generated videos of affluent families that were emerging. The family of a key coalition partner in the Oli led government, if that was the Nepali Congress, their videos, I mean, Sher Bahadur Deuba, his wife, and his son, the videos of them, talking about how they have, a concentrated wealth in themselves and also enjoy a lot of power in the Nepalese politics were certainly floating on the social media platform. But there was a certain sense that obviously when a coalition partner is under attack on social media, there is certainly a compulsion of coalition where Prime Minister Oli had to act upon to take care of the political equations, at the same time control the narrative that was not certainly helping, not helping the one of his key coalition partner. So what the best way to control that was to ask, to get the social media platforms under the jurisdiction of the Nepalese government. Unfortunately, for several, I would say at least past 2 decades, the government of Nepal has come up with policies to control or to operate social media within its jurisdiction. But these were not taken so seriously. But because there was a situation, there were political stakes at hand. The government of Nepal, led by KP Oli, brought in certain provisions that mandated the social media platforms to register themselves within Nepal under their laws. And also, you know, one of the key feature, I mean, one of the key reasons if they were going to register was that they would be they will be obligated to implement some of the requests that were coming from the government, and that could be easily be protecting the interests of the coalition partner. But what happened that many of the social media platforms like YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, they didn't turn up to register. And that is not mainly that they were not intending as per the media reports, they were not intending. Rather, it was a very short duration given to them, of 1 week's time, which was certainly not helpful to social media platforms, companies like Meta or X, because they needed some time to understand the complexities or the legal provisions that were there in place. And finally, after a week's time, these social media platforms were banned. Leading to that was a kind of disenchantment against the government. People said you cannot write away, block the social media platforms just like that overnight. And on 23rd, it was on August 23rd that government banned major social media platforms. But in the last week of August, major cities across Nepal, including Kathmandu, the capital city, started to see a lot of public gathering, especially the Gen Zs, and mainly, social media is often seen as a platform to express freely. Also, it's away from the media censorship. Rather, it gives you a free platform. But what happened in Nepal was that it was not, I mean, like every other country, social media is not just about, freedom of expression or you want to write something. Rather, it's also a way of communicating with your loved ones. And also, considering Nepal has a large immigrant population, it was certainly a major challenge. Second, social media also has become one of the key, modes of making an earning. Considering a lot of social media influencers are making money out of it through their videos, through their endorsements, and that was something that got stopped suddenly. After social media was banned, then again because the protest and violent, uh, there was certain sense of finding different ways to start again communicating, and Discord is one of the key apps that was used because it does not require internet. Rather, it requires, it is built in a way that through Bluetooth, it from one device to another, it creates a circle, and just it reaches to the right people. The message reaches to the right people. So that was used to organize protests against the government. Uh, but it was, in my view, I don't think that the Gen Z group had even thought that the situation would escalate to that extent. Rather, it was seen as that they would be protesting against the government move, and finally, there will be an understanding between the two parties. Unfortunately, in Nepal's case, especially with KP Oli, he has always been seen as an authoritarian leader. Uh, as as is often seen, a trait with very traditional communist leaders across the world, that they like to be, they like to feel that they are in control. And certainly, this situation, when it felt like that he was not in control, he did not like that situation. And finally, he was forced to resign. So these 2 days, 8th and 9th September, protests turned violent and almost costing almost 70 plus people, around 74 people losing their lives. And that included the school going kids. On September 9th, Prime Minister Oli resigned, and he was given a safe passage by the army chief. And finally, the army also intervened, and the situation was brought to a controlled situation. And on between 10th and 14th, negotiations started, and the Gen Zs were consulted. Initially, there were situations where they were not seen, being consulted, but finally they were consulted. So there were three actors: Prime Minister, the army chief was there, the Gen Z group representatives were there, and also somebody, very well known, Sushila Karki. She is the former Chief Justice, the first women to lead the office, the Chief Justice of Nepal. One of the key, I would say, during her leadership, she was seen as somebody who did not, who was not aligning with the government dictates. And finally, she was also seen as a neutral candidate who could do something for the country. She was also empathetic and sympathetic towards the what was going within the country and the demands of the Gen Z group. But there were immediate factors that led to the downfall of the government. One would be, as I discussed, ban on the social media. Second, the internet went off. And then there was a third factor that was the subdivision of it, basically the attack on freedom of expression and free speech, because ban on social media certainly mean that you would not be able to express what you feel. Then again, as I mentioned, social media is just not a medium of expression. Rather, it's also a way of connecting and earning. That was also stopped. And also the anarchic behavior. So these were some immediate factors that were visible. But there have been underlying factors. As one of the underlying factor, as Professor, excuse me, Professor Lama mentioned, is the failure of the institutional failure within Nepal, and also failure of the governance. So corruption was one of the visible factors. It was an underlying factor at the same time. It was a visible factor during the protest, that people were really unhappy with the way corruption has the menace of corruption has uh, affected the institutions in Nepal and at large the democracy. Nepotism, again, that was the basic genesis of the movement. Uh, the third one would be the political instability. That's a very interesting aspect to look into. Nepal became a democracy in 2008, and it was after a decade-long Maoist insurgency. It was an armed Maoist insurgency, and finally in 2008, certain political stability was achieved, and finally because and monarchy was abolished. But despite 17 years into a democratic order, uh, you know, there have no government. Nepal hosts elections every 5 years, but no government has been able to complete 5 years term. That's been a real huge challenge. And in last 17 years, if you see, there have been 13 governments. Uh, you know, this is the same set of people who have been leading the government. For example, the KP Sharma Oli of Communist Party of Nepal, MLA. Then you have Prime Minister Prachanda of Maoist Center. And then you have Prime Minister Sher Bahadur Deuba of the Nepali Congress. So these three, people have been, playing the, musical chairs. There have been other prime ministers in the past for, brief terms, but these three have actually captured basically the momentum of the Nepalese politics. Unfortunately, they're so hell bent on, coming into power, or the only goal seems to be gain some power, gain the entry to the apex office of the prime minister by finding different ways of coalition. And that is where you see the largest opposition party or the largest elected party both coming together and forming a government, so which has been one of the ailments that Nepalese democracy has faced in past few years. Again, the migration has become, since the government institutions have collapsed, the democratic institutions have collapsed, one way or the other. I mean, after 1990s, when the Maoist insurgency started, people had started migrating out of Nepal. And, as a result of this migration, you see a lot of banks have come up, a lot of agencies, helping people to get employment outside Nepal. They've become really institutionalized, and as a result, everybody wants to get out because they want to have a better means of the life. As a result, it has become a culture, and a lot of people have started living out. So it is seen as the government is not really investing itself in creating job opportunities at home. As a result, people are forced to migrate where they can have opportunities at home if there is a better governance model. So these were some of the underlying factors. Coming to protest part, protests in Nepal are not very new. I mean, Professor Lama's interview to The Wire was certainly explains it at length, but here are some of the highlights where you saw in 1960s, Nepal was a monarchy for a very long time, almost more than around 2 centuries. In 1950s, Rana oligarchy, was gone, and finally the Shahs took the reins back. But in 1960s, there were pro-democracy, movement, and in 1980s, in 1960s, one panchayati system was introduced where the political role of the political parties was, demolished, and it was the panchayati system where king had a huge role to play, was brought in, and through and past. So for 30 years, almost 3 decades, the political parties were really not brought into the political foray of the country. And finally, as a unhappy political parties who were really working towards organizing themselves, not just within Nepal, but they're also organizing themselves within, across borders. They had huge plannings in India. Political parties like Communist Party of Nepal, Nepali Congress, they had they had their roots in Calcutta and in Banaras. So India certainly was considered as a base. But in 1990s, movement took, Jan Andolan took place, and finally the political parties were reinstated. Again, between 1996 2006, you see armed rebellion by the Maoist Centre Party led by Pushkamal Dal Prachanda, and also Baburam Bhattarai, who also became later the Prime Minister of Nepal. And then in 2015, you saw protests against a new constitution. Entire Madhes was burning because they were really unhappy with the way their political representation was given. And finally, in 2025, we have seen the Gen Z movement, uh, which has been a kind of which has received global attention. But how this Gen Z movement is so different compared to the previous ones? So I would say, excuse me for a minute. First, this is the first time a democratically elected government was toppled over a social media ban anywhere in the world. Not yet. So this has been the first incident globally. Second, demands for change within the democratic order. If you see the previous protests, you would see that either they were against the monarchy, they were against the panchayati system, they were demanding the reinstating of the political parties. But these protests were certainly not asking for a regime change. They were not asking for a change in the democratic order. Rather, they were asking for reforms. They were asking for Nepal to change for its better capacity. Also demand for reforms in the governments and political system, because these three Prachanda, Oli, and Deva were always seen taking playing musical chairs and leading the government, and somebody, one or the other, would be taking the government. And again, this was also a kind of disenchantment against the oligarchy, kind of a deformed form of the two words, which is somebody old plus a form of oligarchy. So oligarchy, which meant that they were wanting more youthful leadership within Nepal. And finally, I would say now the elections are scheduled for March 5th. Everybody has in 2026, everybody has their doubts over whether elections will be happening within Nepal by that deadline, considering political parties are still very strong and very active, and also political leaders, be it Prachanda, Oli, or Deuba, they are some way or the other trying to manipulate the system. And today, if you go to Nepal, you would certainly, Professor Lama also mentioned that the situation feels normal. Everybody's back to their business. So what happened was a reflection. What happened was a demand for change. But whether that change is coming or not, just today itself, there were representatives of the Gen Z groups met the Prime Minister, and there seems to be a different situation evolving where both parties seem unhappy with each other. So that would be an interesting aspect to look into the future. Then how did China respond? I mean, if I look into how India has responded, that will be another topic itself. But Nepal being between the two countries, India and China, China has been a very important supporter and also a very important neighbor of Nepal. But looking from what was China's response, certainly any political upheaval, any political movement or any armed rebellion, which has been the case in the past in Nepal, has its spillover effects on China. Certainly, China sees it as a security challenge for itself. At the same time, the official response, if you see, the official response has been really measured, which has also been the case in the past. So on 10th September, the Chinese Ministry China's Foreign Ministry as spokesperson spoke on asking, suggesting that China and Nepal are each other's traditional friends and neighbors. Hope the various sectors in Nepal will approach these domestic issues properly and restore order and stability in the country very soon. And also, it showed concerns for its nationals in Nepal. One of the key observations, and also on 14th, on the election of Madam Karki, China again hinted at that it would we stand ready to work with Nepal to promote five principles of peaceful coexistence, meaning that there has to be respect for mutual security, mutual respect, and also enhance exchanges and cooperation in various fields, further advancing the bilateral relationship. One of the key observations from these interactions you would see is that the Chinese side is in complete denial of referring to Gen Z movement. Uh, Certainly, it has its own internal dynamics. That's us, saying that Gen Z's, a neighboring country where a youth-led movement has toppled the government might not be a good signal for the Chinese Gen Z, and that's how their, responses have been really measured. Uh, in terms of social media, I mean, there has been a chatter on the social media, I would say, Weibo, WeChat, etc. I mean, there have been parallels drawn with the color revolution, where also the ideological colonization by the West is certainly a very key highlight, that how foreign countries are trying to manipulate the democratic order in Nepal and also trying to intervene into the political affairs of the country. And also, going back to the official response, one of the key uh, you know foreign policy uh, dealing of China with Nepal has been that China prefers to project itself as a non-interventionist power. On the other hand, India is often seen as intervening into its political affairs. So whatever responses that China has made officially are measured in a way that it none of its responses are seen as intervening into the political affairs, which is kind of very sensitive topic to a country like Nepal, which is landlocked, plus also which comes across the challenges that bigger neighbors often try to manipulate the internal affairs, and that China does not want. I mean, China certainly has its lessons from what has happened between India and Nepal, so it wants to avoid all of it. So on the projection side, it is measured and also very neutral. uh, but on social media, again, there have been rumors on ideological colonization by the West, plus also, very interestingly, rumors around the CIA role. Uh, Yet, I mean, I would say, the studies are there. There have been media, reports suggesting such, roles. But I would, take everything with the confirmation of the research in that sense. Coming to the media at large, again, none of the media outlets, largely the English media, have used the Gen Z word or Gen Z-led movement. Rather, they have tried finding different, equations or different words. That is the political upheaval, social disharmony, political unrest, societal issues, social disorder. And I have taken two news bites from here, Xinhua, and the second one is from the Global Times, China Daily, pardon. Xinhua also suggests that so the selection of words is pretty interesting, and I would like to read some of it. So China hopes all sectors in Nepal can properly address their domestic issues and restore social order and national stability at an early date. So it was referring to the remarks made by the Chinese Foreign Ministry, and also China and Nepal are traditionally friendly countries. Uh, Similar, observations were made in other news bites in the Chinese media. Coming to whether it is a challenge or opportunity for China, if you look at the previous occasions, from 1955 onwards, during the reign of when King Mahendra, when Mahendra became the king, China started a better interaction, formalized ties with Nepal, and it started seeing some sprouting in Nepal in terms of its strategic presence. But it was always countered by the strongest presence, that is the traditional presence of India. But since the advent of democracy in Nepal, we have seen that uh, you know uh, political parties like the left parties, I would say, uh, CP and UML, Maoist, Maoist Center, they have been really supportive to China, and also shown some kind of ideological affiliation. But looking at what I would say in terms of challenges, it is certainly a challenge for China. It is observing the situation very carefully. But again, Gen Z is a faceless entity, and it would really want some, better understanding of who leads the government in the future, whether political parties will be a viable option or not, or whether they will be, or the traditional political parties will be making a comeback or not. They are still assessing. China is still assessing the situation. So Gen Z is a faceless entity. Really not. There is a unpredictable behavior, and also the current interim government does not see foreign policy as a priority. Rather, it is focusing on the domestic issues. So China does not have a clue whether in what direction it is moving. On the uh, Also, there is a missing traditional partners like there are missing traditional partners like Communist Party of Nepal, UML, and Maoist Center. Left parties were helpful to China in charting a new future in Nepal. If you see, Maoist Center helped Beijing with better control over Tibetan issues. If you look into the history of China's, give me a second. I think my AC has gone off. Okay. There is a void because of the political parties that were close to China have gone off. They're not there. Professor Lama also mentioned that it is a partyless. After in those 2 days of the protest, it felt like there was no government, there were no political parties, there were no democratic institutions existing. So on similar lines, still there is no clarity on who would lead the future government, and whether China can again, trust the left parties as the strongest future partners. And then also, protest and instability are considered as security risks to Chinese national businesses and strategic interests. And also, BRI has already been delayed. Whether that would move forward or not, that also remains in question. Because right now there is no political party in the ruling the government, running the government, then it has lesser control over the information and narrative, especially with regards to India. Uh, Again, one very interesting highlight of the recent engagements between the since the interim government has come up, is the Tibet factor, which remains one of the key factors between Nepal and China. But there was a congratulatory message from Dalai Lama, who congratulated Prime Minister Karki on her appointment, and also he added, I would like to read, quote, "As you know, the Nepalese and Tibetan peoples have historically enjoyed a close relationship. And again, he unquote and quote, I am very grateful to the government and the people of Nepal for providing facilities for rehabilitation of the Tibetan refugees following their forced escape from Tibet after 1959. Full stop, indeed. Although the Tibetan community is relatively small, I believe it has been making a notable contribution towards Nepal's economic growth. Unquote. So if you see, there is a in the 60s, a lot of Tibetan refugees escaped to India using the Nepalese route. At the same time, many of them stayed there. So there is an entire refugee population. I would say at least around less than 10,000 people are still there in Nepal, and many of them have migrated to third countries like United States, Canada, Australia. But those who have stayed in Nepal is still those who have become eventually part of the Nepalese society are making contributions, but there are once in a while questions raised on their contribution, how they are contributing to the Nepalese society, and whether the kind of aid and amount of support that the government of Nepal provides them, whether that comes back from them in terms of their contributions to the Nepalese society. So there have been debates, but this was certainly a very first event between the Tibetan government in exile plus the newly elected government, because in past 7 decades I don't recall, or I haven't come across, Professor Lama can speak more about it, but I haven't seen or come across any such public communications between Dalai Lama or the Tibetan government in exile and the government of Nepal. They have their own official channels through which they interact, but this was certainly a first one. So, not sure whether the intention of such message was to pin the Chinese, but certainly there are, worries across the Tibetan community whether their interests will be protected. Um, Coming to the last bit of it, there is certainly a new engagement. The Gen Zs provide new engagement channels to the Chinese. A youth-focused government may prioritize development and tech partnerships with China, and that could be something that Beijing would take up really quickly. The second would be the soft power influence that China does enjoy with the youth. We all have been to China. We have seen how China has been really keen on providing scholarships to Nepalese youth, plus also engaging with them. Universities like Sichuan University, Yunnan University, they are hosting a large population of Nepalese youth. So certainly, if that becomes a goodwill for the Chinese in Nepal, certainly how that will play out could become an opportunity for Beijing in the long run. Third one, I would say a counter force against China. If you recall, in 2015, when India was seen intervening into its political affairs, especially when Nepal came up with a constitution, there were hashtags going on social media like "Back of India, Go Back India." The similar things were seen in 2020 when the territorial dispute started. So uh, that unhappiness within the Nepalese youth towards India has been there. So if China wants to utilize it in certain senses, I would say it remains to be seen how it does. But if the future leadership in Nepal comes with a lot of Gen Z youth, and also there is a younger participation, it might provide become an opportunity for China. Also, Chinese investments have often been halted because of the long-term instability in Nepal, political instability in Nepal. So, if China adopts strategies that are seen a reliable partner for the Nepalese youth and civil society, it can secure an influence in post-protest era. And finally, diplomatic leverage can, Gen Z could position itself as a stabilizing force and as it maintains a non-interventionist, China can position itself as a stabilizing force as it maintains a non-interventionist outlook, as I mentioned in the past. Uh, this is all from my side, and I'm really happy to answer any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Rishi Gupta. I think you presented a very comprehensive note on what really led to the situation which Nepal is undergoing today. And you also referred to quite a few interesting issues related to JNG movements, and of course, what have been the reactions of China. Uh, Before we go for the Q&A, let me also highlight very interesting aspects of Nepalese polity. In the last 25 years, there have been 5 significant events, and all these significant events have doubly enhanced the aspirations of the people. Like the Maoist movement, right? Very violent movement, but mobilized the what you call it, ignored, neglected, discriminated, and deprived communities, including the Madhises, the Janajatis, the Dalits, women, and to a large extent even youth. So they brought these 5 categories of social groups and launched the movement, and that really raised the aspirations. Secondly, the demolition of the institution of monarchy. Everyone thought that monarchy had been the real block as far as democratic aspirations, democratic development, and economic development process is concerned. So people thought that once institution of monarchy is uprooted, many things would be better in Nepal. The 2008 elections, for the first time, I happened to participate in this election as an international observer, and I could see that in the remotest possible areas in far western Nepal and even in eastern Nepal, I could see people really thought that there will be a kind of a very tangible, very perceptible and transforming change in Nepal as far as development aspirations are concerned. And of course, the 2015 constitution, right? People thought that many things would happen. But all these 5 critical events did not bring about any substantive changes as far as the political parties and the political leaderships, their orientations, their their governance process, their connecting with the communities in different geographies just did not change. It happened what was there before the Maoist movement, right? But things have changed in Nepal drastically. For example, the NGOs are so strong in Nepal today. I could see there were hardly 37 NGOs in 1987, and today there will be more than 50,000 NGOs. And if you see the longitudinal character of these NGOs, they deal with religious matters, caste, ideology, geography, environment, development, right? And these NGOs are used by constituencies, by different groups, including the US and the European countries, and to a certain extent, even India. But what is very critical today in Nepal is the Genji movement is really looking forward to have a new set of political parties and political leadership. And that is where I feel it is very, very critical for us to understand what is the exact nature of Nepalese polity. I would say that today and in the last 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, the entire Nepalese political system has been run, conducted, governed, and carried out by 8% of the population. That is the Hill Brahmins, right? You name any of the leaders in the last 30, 40 years, regardless of their political, ideological affiliations, it is 8 to 9% of the population actually controlling 92%, 91% of the population. So Gen Z is looking forward to change this dynamics, this political economic process. They are saying that, okay, Janajatis would be almost 36%, Mangar, Gurung, Tamang, Rai, Limbu, Thami, right? Then there will be Madhesis, there is 14%, Dalits would be 14%. Then there are youth, there are women. So they are keenly looking forward to do this, to change the entire dynamics of the governance and the participation process. But more critical than this is, I think, as Dr. Gupta rightly mentioned, that the interim government should not do anything except conducting elections as effectively, as fairly, and as in a most representative manner. That's all. They should not deal with the constitution at all. They should not deal with any other institutional matters, precisely because there is no time, right? And precisely because they don't have mandate, right? But as far as the Chinese are concerned, Chinese have been very closely watching the situations. And Chinese are willing to change their partnership, their partners in Nepal. This is what I can see that, right? Like India, their partners in Nepal were also this, this Hill Brahmins leadership, right? But over the years, they have said that these leaderships have really played one against another. They know how to manipulate, how to who to check, who to discuss with, and how to really negotiate. They know, right? So Chinese are very keenly looking forward to this. But what is very critical today, as far as Chinese is concerned, you know, the Chinese have gone into the Nepalese economic system in a much, much deeper, wider, and in a diverse manner. So there is no question for Chinese to withdraw. I was just looking at the latest figure of the foreign investment scenario there. You know, out of the total projects of almost the of the total 402 approved projects in the FDI list, Chinese would have almost 252 projects, that is 63%. India would be 32 projects, 8%. Americans would be 23%, 23 projects, 6%. So Chinese have a trade, the investment part of it, the technology part of it, the foreign economic assistance part of it, the connectivity part of it, you know, and the influence, the influence on Buddhism and the Himalayan region. I think they are going to be very, very critical. So I think it's not going to be very easy even after the election. The situation is going to be much more complex. And that is where it all depends upon how India would negotiate with the, the political parties, the Gen Z, the federalism process there, the constitution making process there. It will be very, very interesting to see all these things. Therefore, I think this is for the first time Nepal would be facing a kind of a, what you call it, a very complex, you know, and the complexity is so diverse, so deep rooted now that countries outside Nepal may not be able to analyze as effectively as they used to do it in 80s. Say, for example, the Americans. I don't think Americans would not now, Americans, as far as Nepal is concerned, would not partner with India now. It's very, very sure. Americans would go on its own way, right? Because they think that uh, partnering with India, they could not really stop the Chinese. So they would like to do all kinds of things that would stop the Chinese right at their doorstep. And I think Americans would go all alone precisely because they think that partnering with India was not as effective as they thought. Therefore, questions are many, situations are going to be very, very complex. Third is what kind of, who will take decisions at critical moments, and what kind of decisions, and whether decisions, those decisions will be carried out by the people at large and the political parties would be a big question. So I'm sure we will have about, now we have about 35 to 40 minutes, and I think we will have quite a few questions, and I'm sure Dr. Gupta would be able to respond to them. Thank you. Questions? Uh, Sital, Avni, please tell us what are the questions like. Can you please connect us to the viewers?
Avni, please unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry. So we have one question from Mr. Rappai Malyakal. He asks whether there is any information about Prime Minister Sushila Karki's engagement with China and what have Indian NGOs and government agencies done regarding the same.
I mean, so far, can I take this question?
Yes, sir,
Okay.
you can
Please
take
go
this.
ahead.
I would
Yeah.
say so far, the interaction between Prime Minister Karki and China has been that she had a courtesy meeting with the Chinese ambassador in Nepal. They exchanged notes, and she has also thanked China for its support, overall support. But beyond that, I don't see any larger interaction so far. As I said, foreign policy is right now not the priority. Plus, the sheer collapse of the institution does not also allow Nepal to conduct its foreign policy. It doesn't have a foreign minister. The prime minister is leading that portfolio. So certainly it requires a lot of work. At the same time, right now every part of the governance is in a ad hoc, conducted in a very ad hoc manner, except some of the departments that have seen, ministers who have been appointed. But in terms of India's connection with NGOs, I will not be a right person to comment on that. Second, I would say there is, I think, what about the influence of Europeans and Germans? As Professor Lama also mentioned that through NGOs, foreign NGOs, there are German foundations, there are European foundations, German European foundations who have been providing assistance to Nepal for its humanitarian purposes, at the same time for academic works, and also youth, also introducing a lot of youth programs, inviting them, Nepalese youth to Europe, giving, creating atmosphere of exchange. I don't know if in the long term it is going to matter. At the same time, certainly, their engagement has a significant impact on the Nepalese politics and Nepalese society. But Avni, if there are no questions, if I can go back to what Professor Lama said, I think the three key points. One, how will India negotiate with the Gen Zs if India has a plan? I would say India has been proactive, very rare, but India has been really proactive. If you remember, Prime Minister was speaking in Manipur. He was addressing a local, rally, but for the first time on foreign policy matters, India, Prime Minister Modi spoke and directly connected with the Gen Z youth in Nepal, and also he appreciated that how in the after the arson and a lot of damage took place in Nepal, they were really quick in clearing the streets. So Prime Minister Modi appreciated their effort. So I would say India is trying to really trying to engage with the new force, and the certainly Gen Z is a faceless force right now. At the same time, if there is a goodwill, India has a long way to go. The second one, Professor Lama said about Chinese are eager to engage with the new leadership, and that's not just in Nepal. That is across the South Asian region, be it in what happened in the Taliban regime. Chinese were really quick in engaging. I don't think so. It for them it matters who leads. For them, whosoever is in power is to be engaged with. And I think in Nepal also they would want to follow the same pattern. And I think the Chinese role in the Nepalese economy in past I would say 2 decades. This moment has been in the making. Once in a while, we hear the news that China has surpassed Indian FDI in Nepal, and also sometimes India has surpassed Chinese FDI in Nepal. So these counter questions keep coming, but count data keep coming. But certainly, Professor Lama has been right in pointing how China has found its roots very deep into the Nepalese society, economy, political parties, plus also very eager to engage with anybody who is in power. In the if you look at the political shift that took place in the 19 in early 2000s, China was really not even was not ready to even acknowledge the Maoists. Maoist Center Party and their ideology, saying that they do not represent the real ideological teachings of Mao. But look at the situation today; it has drastically changed. Chinese have interacted with the left parties, including the Maoist Center, very deeply. So I would say China would be looking to have anybody who comes to power to exchange views, also work with. Okay, so let me know if there are any other questions.
Yes, sir. We have another question from Mr. Tenzing Dhamdul. He asks, how does this ongoing instability in region impact India-China relations moving forward? It began from Tibet in 1950s, and now we see it happening around the entire Indian subcontinent, with Nepal being the most recent case.
So I would say it is certainly a situation. So if you, how does these ongoing instability in the region impact India-China relationship moving forward? India has, for the longest, been a traditional partner to almost all South Asian countries. India is well located at the center. At the same time, its location itself has been seen as a challenge to a lot of smaller neighbors, also creating a sense of unhappiness, insecurity. But in the latter stage, if you see, China has emerged as a key negotiator, or to say, has been trying to fill a gap that India's sour relationships with South Asian countries has left behind. So, for example, today China is trying to create a trilateral forum between Bangladesh, Pakistan, and China. It is also inviting other South Asian countries to come to accept India, to come to. It is not really. It, it it also invites India at the same time. It is trying to create different coalitions within the region, and is also seen as a facilitator of tough talks that have not happened. For example, Bangladesh and Pakistan in that sense. So I would say there is a looming, or I would say an existing strategic challenge, strategic contestation between India and China. Uh, India, as a traditional partner, or the for the longest it has engaged with South Asian countries. Any loss, I would say, any loss of goodwill, any loss of projects, any loss of economic engagement will be a minus to India. But at the same time, for China, it started engaging with South Asian countries on all strategic and tangible fronts very late. Not that it did not want, but certainly India was successful in taking in uh, handling that strategic pressure. But today, China is more public facing. China is more engaging. China is also more economically projecting itself as a support, and also as a goodwill ambassador to all smaller countries in their development trajectory. So I would say uh, it's a contest in the making. will be interesting to see how it unfolds in the future. Uh, Also, on the Tibet factor, I would say I don't know how long it can go on. There was a phase, I would say, a 5 decades phase when Tibet factor was really interesting, very impactful. But today, I think all countries across the region, or I would say across the world, have come to an understanding that Tibet remains as an integral part of China. At the same time, a lot of Tibetan refugees who were in Nepal, or who were in Nepal, have migrated to third countries. So that concentration of pressure is kind of evaporating. So I do not see that playing that large role in the future. Any other question?
Yes, thank you, sir. We have another question from Mr. Vishnu Gayatri. He asks, considering the upcoming election in March, do you think there is a possibility of an overthrow of the old oligarchy? If so, how do you believe China will manage its relationship with them, especially if it might encourage Gen Z and revolutionary ideas? What would be its impact on Chinese investments in Nepal? Isn't it like the US and India can interact way better with China in this case? Yes.
Uh, I would say if uh, I don't see these traditional political parties vanishing from the political landscape of Nepal anytime soon. What would matter is if they are ready to bring in new leadership, which is a tough task for all political parties, because people like Prachanda or Oli, they are really not interested in letting a new leadership come into the picture. But what will happen to China? China again, it started from scratch in the late 2000 when the new political forces entered, and I mean, I would say the Maoists mainstream themselves into the political process of the country, formed the first elected government. Uh, they engaged. At the same time, I would say anybody who comes to power today, they're keenly and closely looking at the situation. But whosoever comes to power tomorrow or in the future, China would be keen to engage. Coming to the Chinese interests, be it in Afghanistan, be it in Bangladesh, be it in Pakistan, China minces no words when it comes to its protecting its investments. And I think in their first statement itself, when such political situation unfolds, their statement is that they would really want the government of the day or an interim order to protect the interests of the Chinese investments, and we have seen that happening in in Afghanistan, and that too in Pakistan as well. So I would say the similar approach will be adopted here as well. You're on mute.
Right. So the next question is from Shreyansh Mohanty. He's a research assistant at Institute of Chinese Studies. His question is Beijing watching Nepal as a case study for how bottom-up youth activism could undermine hybrid and authoritarian leaning governments across Asia? And how might this shape Chinese support for like-minded regimes elsewhere?
Very interesting question. I think there are two parts to it. How China looks at youth, making a huge impact in the political process of the country, and also how it can protect itself from that happening within China. And the control on Chinese social media with regards to Gen Z movement in Nepal, itself is a reflection that China itself is vulnerable uh, to youth-led movements. But how China would engage with the youth, I would say, again, it's a new force. One of the key parts of Nepalese history has been that every time there has been a movement, uh, there have been writings calling every new moment in Nepal as Naya Nepal. There have been several Naya Nepals. The same goes in Nepali and that goes in Hindi. There have been several Naya Nepals. I don't know which one is the Naya Nepal. It is so evolving. It is so drastically changing that to predict what will happen in the future is it's a distant hope. But at the same time, I would say China does recognize the youth as a very strong and a very important actor in the political processes across the world, especially in the South Asian region, which is politically very charged. We have seen such incidents in Bangladesh. We saw something happening in Sri Lanka in 2022, in Maldives. Soon after the Gen Z movement happened in Nepal, there were incidents of clashes between the Gen Z youth and the security forces in the Maldives. So I would say China is observing the role of youth. It is also, it might be at a better edge, considering that it has engaged with the South Asian, I would say within the region, it has engaged with the youth largely. And if it will be able to utilize that, goodwill for itself, might certainly work for Beijing.
Right. We have the next question from Mr. Manoranjan Mohanty. He asks, Nepalese constitution has many positive federal and socio-political provisions. Do you anticipate some new amendments to respond to the Gen Z aspirations?
And that's a very interesting question. Again, any constitutional provisions or any constitutional reforms are to be done by elected representatives. There is no elected parliament in place right now. Even the legality of the existing interim government is in question. There are possibilities that tomorrow, if a new political order comes into play, elected government comes, it might also, file cases against the interim government of the day in the court, or drag it to the court, and also ask for its responses, that on what basis this government was appointed by the president of Nepal, because constitution does not have any direct provisions. Rather, there have been interpretations in appointing Sushila Karki. So I would say I don't see any amendments taking place, other than one task that the present government has, is to conduct elections peacefully, and also keep all the parties together, not just the political parties, but also the Gen Z youth, or other stakeholders. So I would say I don't see any possibilities of constitutional amendments taking place anytime soon.
So we don't have any further questions from the chat box. Uh, Professor Mohad, Professor Lama, do you have anything further to add?
Yeah, sure, definitely. I think, well, let me, uh, uh, since Dr. Gupta has responded to um, the questions very elaborately, let me conclude by making few remarks. You know, the incidents that happened in Nepal in the last 40, 50 days very clearly show that uh, the people at large cannot be taken for granted. And in the process, Nepal for the first time could witness how its own diaspora could be a major force to reckon with. Diaspora contributes almost 32% of Nepal's GDP. In 2023 alone, almost 16 lakh young Nepalese went out to different countries, right? So I would say almost 25 to 30% of the young Nepalese, right, able-bodied Nepalese are out of the country, contributing immensely to the development process. It's very clear by now that this diaspora is going to play a very critical role in future, and also in the next election in Nepal. But this also showed us, demonstrated adequately to the entire global world, how violence, once injected into a peaceful, stable society, could lead to several cascading effects, right? The Maoist violence of 10 years, you know, the violence reached the countryside, and the people of countryside also brought violence to the towns and cities. But once the government was formed by a Maoist movement, anyone who was related to violence, any institutions that played a critical role during this violence, they remain totally unaddressed. Totally unaddressed. That means what? That means the violence was the ground for more violence was already alive in Nepal, right? So I would say that the cost of violence injected 20 years back is now brought back to the Nepalese political economy in a much more diabolical manner. My submission at this juncture is, what would be the opportunity for India now? Because it's India is not going to it is not going to be easy for India to deal with the situations after the elections, because it's going to be much more complex, complicated, right? Therefore, for me, this gives us a this gives India a real opportunity to change its Nepal policy and Nepal model. We have, in the last 70 years, it's an orthodox model we followed. Last 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, we will go to the same leadership and say, try to manipulate them, try to negotiate with them, try to bring a new kind of permutations and combinations, and nothing paid, right? Today, the situation is so bad that this instability could be a major, major cost to Indian economic and political system. Therefore, I think India has to change its partners. One, India has to be little innovative in its interconnections with the Nepalese societies, economies, right? Polity there, right? And India has to really, in a much more handsome manner, play a pivotal role in really strengthening federalism. Because at a particular point of time in 1990s, it looked Kathmandu is Nepal, Nepal is Kathmandu, right? The biggest contributions of 2015 constitution is that they brought a federal system, and that federal system actually absorbed so much of shocks in the last 10, 15 years. And I think India has a very, very critical role to bring newer variety of the institutions, train people, build capacity, develop, do connectivity projects, develop agriculture, industry, services sector in in these federal units. I think that is going to be a major, major, what you call it, bastion of Indian constituency, which is no longer there. India had a huge constituency of its own, people who had graduated from India, people who were trained in India, people uh, who were given capacity building projects in India. They had gone, so they had become a very, very strong constituency, from media to politics to engineering to technology. But today, India literally does not have a constituency. So India has to rebuild its constituency. Therefore, my last point is, it's not that China is a new player in Nepal. If you see what had China done in 50s, in 60s, 17, 80s, 70s and 80s, we, India and China were always in a competitive mode there. If India does the Tribhuvan highway connecting plains land of India with Kathmandu, Chinese will build Kathmandu Kodari highway connecting Kathmandu with the Tibetan highlands. If India does Siddharth Rajmarg, Chinese would do Prithvi Rajmarg. If India does ring road project, Chinese does ring road project, India would do university projects. If India does what you call it, the airport projects, Chinese would do a kind of a conference hall building project, all kinds of things, right? But today you will see if India does Devigad, Chinese would do Sunkosi project. But today, what is happening is Chinese would like to really take the leadership as far as management of or negotiating with Nepal is concerned. So in microeconomics, we call it Cournot's model, that is leadership followership model. That means what China is trying to do is we take the leadership and rest all the countries who are participating in Nepal's development process would be followers. That's why they talk about the Himalayas. That's why they talk about Buddhism. That's why they talk about connectivity that would link major tourism projects, major trade projects. I think this is very, very critical. And I think India has to really rethink its entire strategy in Nepal. And when it comes to India rethinking its strategy in Nepal, the first thing India has to do is to really change the model, making Nepal from the from making Nepal dependent on India to creating an interdependence model. Why not? If India really is serious about BBIN project, sub-regionalism, BIMSTEC and all, India should allow Nepal to go through northeast part of India and use its trilateral highway, India, Myanmar and Thailand highway to enter into northeast, to enter into Southeast Asia. Can India think of this kind of projects? India should allow use of Fulbari corridor to access the deep sea port, Matarbari port, done by the Japanese there in Bangladesh. Can India do so? Can India sell India Nepalese electricity through its what you call it CBET cross border electricity trading project, sell Nepalese electricity, Bhutanese electricity to the electricity uh, shortest country like Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, Myanmar, and Thailand also. So I think it gives absolutely a brilliant opportunity for India to really do something big, something far-reaching, and something transforming in Nepal besides what it has been playing. So I think I would like to thank adequately and profusely the ICS, uh, Professor Acharya, for uh, giving this opportunity to host a discussion on Nepal, China, and other neighboring countries, including India. And I would also like to thank Dr. Rishi Gupta for making the entire presentation so sound and so logical, and the entire viewers. With this, I would like to end my participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Lama. With this, we come to an end to today's seminar. We thank Dr. Gupta and Professor Lama for gracing today's seminar with their presence and for giving us their precious time. We also thank the audience for joining us today. We would like to invite you to the upcoming Wednesday seminar. Further information regarding the event can be found at the ICS website. You may also subscribe to our newsletter for regular updates. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
very much. Thank you.